everyone. Hello. Special thanks to Bishoy. He comes with many nicknames, but we'll just know him as Bishoy today. When Bishoy first proposed the topic and the background to the topic, I was actually quite excited. I thought, this is fantastic. What a great topic of discussion. And it really lends itself to the times that we live in today. So when we start to think about there will come a day, and Bishoy's given us some background into St. Anthony the Great, it really makes you start to think. And there was an article in recent times about what our own bishop had to stand up and do at a recent Council of Churches meeting, an international Council of Churches meeting. I thought, you know what, that's a great example of what we have to do. So there will come a day. There will come a day when the mad people will look at the normal people and say, look at these mad people because they are not like us. And you know what? That day could well be today. Because there are so many examples of craziness in the world that is now becoming normal. It's becoming normal everywhere around us. So let's talk about St. Anthony the Great for a little bit before we move on. Do you guys want to play a game? Yeah? Everybody up. Stand up. Let's play a game. Let's play a little game. Let's make a circle. Anywhere you like. Make a circle. You can work with the chairs. Standing close to each other. Not a straight line, people. A circle. Okay. When Leonardo da Vinci was asked to draw a circle, this was not it. Come on. You need to be standing close to somebody. Yeah? So a close circle. I'm sorry about the word close. Close circle. How you doing? Very good. A bit tighter. Let's get a bit tighter. Yeah, I'm going to be picky on this one. Close circle. Even closer. Alright, how are we going?
We ended up with a D.
Take your right, a D will do. Can you reach the person's right hand? Can you see it next to you? Yeah? You good? Yep. Take your right hand, and your right hand will be open palm up, as I've got right here. Yep? To the person next to you. Now, take your left hand and with your index finger, point it down to the person's right hand who's next to you. Are we getting that? Yeah? So, I would like for you to actually... you got it? You got to be kidding me. Anybody confused by that? No? We're all good. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story about St. Anthony the Great. St. Anthony the Great. And I'm going to say throughout the story a magic word. You guys okay with that? When I say that magic word, the game is this. You will either grab the person's finger. At the same time, you've got to get your finger away from the person. Got it? Yeah? If you get caught, you're out. Okay. The magic word. The magic word is joy. Okay? Magic word is joy. I haven't started yet. So this is a story. This is a story that actually happened, and it's about St. Anthony the Great. St. Anthony was travelling in the desert, and he found a plate of silver coins in his path. He pondered for a moment as to why this plate of silver coins would be in the desert, where no one else travels or experiences joy. If you got caught, hands down, hands down.
If you get caught, do you sit down?
No, just hands down. And if you're out, then you're going to have to step out of the circle. And we'll see. Yeah, do you want that to be practice? You've got to be caught, but you can't like yank it out. That's not fair. All right, let's continue. So, if you've been caught, you're out. Okay? Tighter circle, tighter circle. Then he realised, St. Anthony realised, the devil must have laid it out there to tempt him. To that he said, "Ha, devil, thou weenest to tempt me and deceive me, but it shall not be in thy power." Once he said that, the plate of silver disappeared. St. Anthony continued walking along and saw a pile of gold in his way, which the devil had laid there to deceive him and take his joy. How are we doing? Tighter circle, tighter circle. St. Anthony cast the pile of gold into a fire and it vanished, just like the silver coins did. After these events, St. Anthony had a vision where the whole world was lacking joy. But full of snares and traps. He cries to the Lord, "O good Lord, who may escape these snares and retain their joy?" A voice said back to him, "Humility shall escape them without more." How are we doing? Do people who are outside, do you guys want back in?
Yes. No. Then we haven't done that, right? Circle? On the outskirts of
People in the circle, would you like the wider group to be back in?
No.
It's all about joy.
He said joy! Eric, thank you very much.
All right, everybody back in. Everybody back in. Last time round, everybody back in. Come on in.
This guy's taking this one.
All right, you in position?
Hold on, are we meant to be touching their hand? Are we meant to be touching their palm?
You can just be pointing above. Now, believe it or not, this is actually part of our discussion tonight. I'm asking you to concentrate on particular words that are demonstrated by St. Anthony and that are true Christian values. Okay? So there is a method to this fun and games that we're having. So when St. Anthony asked the Lord, "O Lord, who may escape from these snares?" his answer was, "Humility shall escape them without more." The next story that I'm going to recite to you is all about demons in a cave. Demons in a cave. So, No. So the next word that I'd like to discuss with you. You guys ready? Are you guys ready? Yeah, I'm going to change words. Are you ready? Yes? Are you ready? Let's go with peace. Now we know about St. Anthony and the peace that he had in his life. That was quick. That was straight in. Wow, that was lightning fast. Come on. One time. St. Anthony tried hiding in a cave to escape the demons that plagued him. Do you guys know that St. Anthony was actually plagued by demons? Yeah? He was plagued by demons. He was always tested by demons. The demons would appear to him as beasts. They would injure him. They would hurt him physically, and not just appear to him and disappear. Not just a simple temptation. So he was trying to escape these demons, and he ran into a cave. In that cave, there was no peace. There were so many little demons in that cave that St. Anthony's servant had to carry him out because they'd beaten him to death. When the hermits who had peace were gathered to St. Anthony's corpse, These are actual events. So when the hermits were gathered to St. Anthony's corpse to mourn his death, so these demons had actually beaten him so much that the hermits came to mourn St. Anthony's death. He was lifeless. St. Anthony was actually revived. He demanded that his servants take him back to the cave where he sought peace. Where the demons had beaten him. When he got there, he called out to the demons, "You will not take my peace." And they came back as wild beasts to rip him to shreds. All of a sudden, a bright light flashed, and the demons ran away, and there was peace. St. Anthony knew that the light must have come from God. And he asked God, where was he before when the demons attacked him and took his peace? God replied, I was here, but I would see and abide and see thy battle, and because thou hast manly fought and well maintained thy battle, I shall make thy name to spread through all the world. And St. Anthony's peace was returned. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause to our three winners. Come on, round of applause. Well done. Everybody come back in. Come back in. No, not in the circle. Back into the... You just love the games, right? Come on in. All right, are you a little bit more awake? So those two games that we just did were actually centred around the life of St. Anthony. And I specifically focused on two words. I focused on joy and I focused on peace. Because they're values that we espouse. They're fruits of the Spirit that we hold dear to us as Christians. So it wasn't just to play a game, it was just to have a bit of fun with you. I hope you enjoyed that. But this is true, you know, when St. Anthony had these visions of the world and the snares and the traps that capture people, he said, oh, good Lord, who may escape from these snares? Who's going to be able to get out of this? And the answer was really simple. It was those who have humility and live that. So when St. Anthony says there will come a time, it's not just when the crazy is called normal crazy. It's when we need to defend our Christian values and faith. And we're challenged with it every day. Challenged with it every day. The demons in the cave, I thought that was one horrendous experience for him to have. Not only did he nearly die from being beaten by the demons, but after recovering, after waking up, he goes back in. Think of how many times we're challenged. How many times we're challenged as Christians to take a stand for something. Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, sometimes I just sit quiet. Sometimes I don't take that stand. When we talk about our Christian values, and this is from Galatians chapter 5. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, adultery, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousness, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in the time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. You know, you think about that in its context and you think, okay, people slip up. They can sin, but there is a repentance. And this is how we can overcome our sins. No one is going to be perfect. But this is the more important side to being Christian now. It's not just about admitting our sins and moving on. It's not just about saying, okay, I messed up. It's about really reveling in the fruits of the Spirit. And that's why I chose joy, and that's why I chose peace. But in there as well, love, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. When you think about the fruits of the Spirit, it may not appear this way, but we are under attack. We are under constant attack. Society has a new definition of normal. And the new definition of normal every day gets a little bit closer to crazy. And pretty soon, as Christians, we're going to be the ones labelled as crazy. Happens around us now. Right? What is the new normal? And this particular verse here, the reason I have this verse here is because I feel like the fruits of the Spirit, the true Christian experience, the truth in Christianity, the values that we espouse to, I feel as though that's under attack. This is what's under attack. What's the new normal? Let me ask you a different question. So get us thinking a little bit more. What's the opposite of love? What's the opposite of love? It's not a thesis question. Hate. What else? Lust. Selfishness. Loathe. What else? Jealousy. What else? Impatience. Have you ever thought about this? Could the simple opposite of love be something as simple as the absence of love? I had a philosophical discussion about this with someone, and I kind of went online, I was reading all sorts of perspectives, and I came across this one description. Is it necessarily hate? Because hate is a pretty harsh thing. Or could it be apathy? Think about it. Apathy. Complete apathy. As Christians, we are to share our love. What happens as Christians when we don't share our love? Nobody's loved. Does it mean that we have celebrated the fruits of the Spirit? Does it mean that we've actually lived the fruits of the Spirit? If as Christians we are to love, then the absence of love is the complete opposite of what Christ taught us. If as Christians we are taught to hate, what would that be? I'm not taught to hate. But I think sometimes we think, oh, well, I don't hate that person. I just stay away from them. Anybody ever thought that? I don't hate them. I don't wish anything bad on that person. But ask yourself this, if I'm apathetic towards a particular person, does that mean that I've shown them love? When we stand before God, when we stand before Christ, and He says, great, did you do the one thing that I asked you to do? Oh, yeah? What was that? To love. Did you love your brother and your sister? Did you love your neighbour? Yep, I was good with this group not so much. How do we stand before God and say, I didn't necessarily show love, but I didn't show hate. So I didn't hate. No. The fruits of the Spirit are under attack. And they're under attack with our own kind of rationalisation of things. So how do we overcome it? How do we overcome it? Overcome the apathy. Cool. How do we do it? How do we overcome the apathy? Hey! Best way to share our love is to actually practice it. Don't let ourselves fall into this trap. Because every single one of us could quite easily slip into it. Our minds play amazing games with us, and it's usually the devil feeding that. We can rationalise anything. Alright, what's the opposite of joy? Oh, I get you thinking now. The first one, opposite of love is hate. No, it's not. It's apathy. What's the opposite of joy? It's not apathy. Anger. Yep, resentment. Despair. Tell me more about despair. What is despair based on? Lost. No hope. Yeah, a lack of hope. How would you end up with a lack of hope? Lack of faith. Yep. Keep it going. Haven't heard the word I want to hear yet. Do you want to put it up? Contempt. Ooh. He said that with the thinker pose as well. Contempt. What else? You know what? Sometimes working out the difference between joy and happiness is as simple as looking at the opposite meanings of each. And if you look at it, believe it or not, happiness, the opposite of happiness is unhappiness or misery or sadness. The opposite of joy is actually fear. Think about it. Think about it. The opposite of joy is fear. Anybody want to give me a reason why? Why would it be fear? Why would it be fear? Yeah. It's the unknown. But we as Christians, what does the Bible tell us? We as Christians know. We know the truth. We have faith. It's fear that takes away our joy. It's the not knowing an event that takes away our joy. But the truth of the matter is this, like the book of John says, God is the reason that we can experience joy. That's why it doesn't matter about the jobs in the world, it doesn't matter about the houses and the cars and that sort of stuff. Because ultimately that peace that we experience, that joy that we experience, isn't linked to things, it's linked to God. It's linked beyond that. So the fruits of our spirit are under attack. Heavy attack. And I've just chosen a few to talk through. In Luke chapter 12 verse 7, "But the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are of more value than any sparrows." What was that in reference to? What was the context of that verse? Yep. Yep. And they were worried. What were they worried about? Yeah, being fed, being provided for. How are we going to do this? You know, where's this going to come from? Where's our food going to come from? And the answer was simple. Doesn't God provide for the birds of the air and the animals on the ground? And doesn't he feed all the birds in the air? Yeah, he does. Well, you're worth a lot more than some sparrows. You're worth a lot more than some sparrows. So trusting in God helps us overcome our fear. Knowing that God will provide helps us overcome our fear. And when you overcome that fear, that's when you experience joy. Alright, what's the opposite of faithfulness? Faith. You guys seen the movie Prisoners? Yeah? Hugh Jackman, good Australian actor. Good Aussie actor. Who's seen it? Yeah? You haven't seen it? I'm going to ruin it for you. There was it's a really disturbing movie. And right at the end, the woman who was behind all of the badness in the film, she made one statement that was just so disturbing. What was the statement? You guys have seen the movie? Yep. If you don't want to hear it, just block your ears. It's part of the meeting, part of the discussion. Well, now you can be informed. Don't remember, we're waging a war on God. We're waging a war on God. Right? And they did it by creating fear and panic. And throughout the movie, people let go of their fundamental values. People let go of their beliefs. People let go of the values and morals that kept them in their faith. It's a really disturbing movie. And it's an extreme example, and it's a really extreme example of how when the going gets really tough, we've got two options. We're going to either take faith and be steadfast in our faith, or we can let it go and try and deal with it in a different way. Really disturbing movie. And the most disturbing thing was, I think it's based on a true story. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that hasn't ruined it for anyone who hasn't seen it too much. Still tense. Another question. What's the opposite of long-suffering?
Impatient. Impatient.
You nearly lost it with me. Got it. A few seconds, that's fine. Impatience. Impatience. Any of you guys Sunday school teachers? You guys must be the most long-suffering people in this room. You know, in today's society, we have our patience slowly stripped away from us and slowly removed from things because everything happens overnight? No, instantaneously, right? So that trait of patience is slowly stripped away from us. And I've spoken to you guys about this before, so what's an example of that for those of you who haven't had this discussion before? What's my typical example of that? Food? Yeah? Food, definitely. Seriously, if I order something and it's not there in 5 minutes, I lose it, right? Everybody's like that these days. Yeah? There's a proliferation of fast food chains. Not because it tastes great, but because it's quick. Everything has to happen quickly. Our life is running before us. And that Christian value, that patience that we used to have, is stripped away. Other examples? Information. So, earlier today, I went to purchase something from JB Hi-Fi. You know what? Within 5 minutes, I had 5 review articles on my phone about which one was better. We live in amazing times, but that information at our fingertips also makes us impatient. And I know you've all got Facebook, or 99.9% of you have Facebook. It's perpetuated through that. Now, I was on Facebook the other day. Now Facebook can automate your history through a video. You guys done that? You guys seen that? Yeah? Facebook will tell you, like they'll automatically go and create a 1-minute video of your life. This is it. It takes all the pictures that you posted and it'll tell you which is your most liked picture, and this is all the stuff that you've... Within a minute. Our lives have been reduced to a minute. Gets worse than that. Who was telling me about the vines? You guys seen that? You seen videos on the vines? Yeah? There's supposed to be a maximum of how long? 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I want a message, I want something to make me laugh in 7 seconds. 7 seconds. Wow. Have you ever thought of the impact of that on us? Think about this. How long does our liturgy go for? Yeah? 3 hours? 2 hours? Yeah? Is that a 7-second deal? Is it a 1-minute deal? Think about how rapid our prayers have become. Bang! Just quick, get it out, let's get it done. We're missing that time with God. We're missing that meditation with God. Our patience is wearing thin. Because society is training us that way. That's how it's running. I wanted to put these two statements up. Long-suffering is that quality of self-restraint in the face of provocation which does not hastily retaliate or promptly punish. It is the opposite of anger and is associated with mercy. Patience is the quality that does not surrender to circumstances or succumb under trial. It is the opposite of despondency and is associated with hope. And slowly, it's being stripped away from us. So when St. Anthony the Great stands before in witness and says, there will come a day when the mad people will look at the normal people and say, look at these mad people because they are not like us. Things to mess with your head. These words are pronounced the same. Yes or no? Okay. If the GH sound is enough is pronounced F and the O in women is pronounced like an E, then the TI in nation is pronounced sh. Then the word fish is pronounced just like fish. Things are going to mess with your head. You know, in newspapers of 1964, this was a big deal. Finding a lucky stamp in a packet of millions that was worth £9 was a big deal. This is a headline which disturbed me no end. I bottle-fed my children, but I breastfed my pug dog. And I cut that image off because the rest of the image was actually a pug being fed. And she's wearing a cross. Our values are under attack. When we see more and more of this rubbish, we become desensitized to it. The more stuff that we see on TV, we become desensitized to it. You know, I know there are hilarious shows on TV like Modern Family, which I kind of find really funny. You know, I found myself thinking, this is great, it's hilarious. The crux of it, you've got two gay guys in a kind of a relationship with a child. That's become a normal. Society is making that now a normal. You watch the show Glee. Glee's a really nice way to capture people because it's, you know, very popular songs that are sung throughout the show. We can connect with the lyrics of the songs because we've heard them before, we know the songs. And it's all about relationships and, you know, homosexuality and that sort of stuff too. That becomes normal now. Now they're taking that learning and trying to impress it upon primary school kids. They want to tell primary school kids about homosexuality, and that's okay, it's all fine, it's all good, you'll be alright. What happens to us? What happens to us as Christians if we let that go? Because I said to you, there will come a day, and that day could be now. That day could be today. The way we fight back falls on all of us. And our apathy to the whole thing is our consent for it to progress. Sorry to say. So at the start of the meeting, I said, St.Bishoy, our bishop, he put that verse up. He quoted St. Anthony the Great. And he berated the heads of churches around the world for allowing these abominations to proliferate throughout our churches. It's an amazing article because he stood there and stood in front of hundreds and thousands of seniors of other churches and said, you guys are out of control. We've got to pull this back. And his words were incredibly powerful. Have you guys read that article? Yeah? It was a conference that happened in Singapore. And he stood up and he blasted everyone. And he blasted churches for appointing bishops. One particular bishop, I can't even recall his name, but he had been married before, he was divorced, he left his wife and his children, and he went to this church and he was appointed a bishop. What is the impact of that on generations to come? What does he teach about marriage and staying in a marriage and relationships? And what does he teach? How does that lead a church? It fragments a church. So there will come a day, the day is here. The day is in everything that we see. It's in everything that we face. When somebody asks you about homosexuality, that's not the time to say, well, you know, I have my opinion and that's it. So what is crazy today? What's normal these days? Is getting married normal these days? Getting married young normal these days? No, that's changed. Attending church. Have you guys ever talked about attending church to your friends? They kind of go, oh, that's nice. Right. The simple fact of sharing your personal Christian life with your friends is a way of sharing what God intended for us. What did you do on the weekend? We went out, went to a restaurant. That's about it. Take the opportunity to say, well, I went to church. And it was great. It was really nice. It was peaceful. It's exactly what I wanted to do. That's a way of sharing our Christianity, sharing our fruits, and sharing our love. God didn't say, take this opportunity and hide it under a lamp. What was that verse about the light and the lampstand and the city? Remember that? Yeah? So what are we doing day to day? What about believing in God? You ever had that discussion? I had this one over and over again. I'm a scientist. I was doing some primary scientific research. You don't think there's some atheists in that group? Oof, that was interesting. But it was fascinating. It opened my eyes. You know, I worked with some, I still do, I work with some of the most intelligent minds in the world. And they are A and B and black and white and fiercely intelligent. And the one thing they miss is that emotional connection with God. Fiercely intelligent. But they can't connect with God. Believing in creation, that was a fun one. Being a scientist again, that was a lot of fun. I always enjoyed debating that one. Not supporting homosexuality. Anybody been confronted with that recently? Yeah? How'd you go? How'd you deal with it?
Pretty well.
Yeah? Yeah, tell us. In a few words, you don't have to stand up.
Because there were a few expletives said, but
no, I don't want you to. Let's go word for word.
Paraphrase. They were
Do
basically
that.
saying, why can't you support people loving one another? Like, you have marriage, which is a sacred thing, and it's kept sacred, and you don't see any traditional cultures which promoted that same-sex love or marriage and things like that. But if you look back, people say, oh, look, we can love each other. But if you actually define homosexuality the way the Romans and the Greeks defined it, you just basically beat them at their own game. You just say, well, homosexuality means gratifications of the body. It's not actually anything metaphysical or anything emotional. It is simply a satisfaction of the body. And if you look at the Greeks, who are quite great philosophers, and these people don't believe in God, so don't try and argue God or the Bible, just use logic and reason. It basically defeats their entire argument.
That's great. Anybody else want to share? You know what it is? You know what I find the most offensive about this topic? Is we're all pushed into supporting something that we don't necessarily support. What about our rights? What about our rights as people, as Christians, as just human beings, to say, well, I don't agree with homosexuality. And if people want to practice homosexuality, that's their decision. But why do I have to go and hold the banner and say I support it? Have you ever thought about the fact that someone is taking away your right, just as a human being? That's one thing. Second thing is, as Christians, it's clearly a sin. Agree or disagree? Right. It's a sin. And fundamentally, a sin is not something that we would encourage. You don't see Christians saying, hey, let's go to Crown and have a flutter. Let's put 10 on black. No. You don't see Christians saying, let's all go to the local pub. No. You do not proactively support something that is going to bring people down, that is going to hurt them. And you shouldn't feel pressured to support something. I have my perspective. If people want to do that, that's totally up to them. Simple as that. We can get into the details of why it's wrong, why genetically it's impossible. I don't buy into the genetic argument at all. I think it's a bogus discussion. I think it's just a distraction. And I'm happy to have that debate with anyone. Anybody. Molecular biology? No problem. Let's talk about it. So, don't let people take away our rights. Don't let people take away the fruits that God has blessed us with. The fruits of the Spirit. Retaining our purity. Here's a topic. Retaining our purity. Have you ever come up against that? I sure as heck did. And it's a common thing. Being sexually active is a very, very common thing, and it is something that challenges youth all over the world. You are a strange person if you won't jump into bed with someone, even on first dates. You know, when I was growing up, oh, no, it's got to be, date after date after date before that happens. Now it's, oh, what's wrong with you? After the first date, that's it. There is no boundaries. Those boundaries are being stripped away. So to try and retain our purity is fundamental to us as Christians. Why? Why?
We're not normal.
No, we're not normal. We're crazy. We're crazy. Right, so fundamental principle, right? We try to connect spiritually with God. Is God physical or spiritual? Spiritual. Yeah? So to do that, what do we have to do with the physical side? Control it. That's what fasting's about. Fasting isn't about food. When you stand in front of God on the day of judgment, it's not going to be about your diet. It's not going to be about what Siami food you had versus what Fatari food you had. It's going to be about what did you do? How did you control yourself? How did you suppress your cravings physically and connect with God spiritually. Because the more you suppress the physical, the more likely you are to reach heightened connection with God. That's why when you fast properly, you feel lighter. Anybody felt that? Yeah? So that spiritual connection means that we need to suppress the physical side. That's why we're not of this world. That's what it's about. Protecting our morals. That's always a tough one. But we're challenged with this every day. I can give you example after example. From our jobs, whether we don't tell the whole truth in our job, or whether we take privileges that we're not entitled to, or whether we turn up a bit late, go home a bit early when we're rostered on for certain shifts, I don't know. But only you can be a judge of how you've upheld your morals, how you've stood against your values. There's no running from it, there's no hiding from it. Protecting our innocence. This one's a kind of a big one for me, because I've got young kids, and we went over to some friends' houses, and I got a strict no music videos policy in our house. Do you guys know why? I don't need to explain why. Those music videos should be banned. I mean, if this was 50 years ago, they would be rated highly pornographic and not to be on TV. So we got a strict no music videos. Yeah, and if we're listening to the radio in the car and something comes on, so be it. No worries. But we try to, in the early years, at least just protect that innocence, that beautiful innocence that a child has. And we were at a friend's house, and the music videos were on. And to my shock and horror, the 4-year-old was explaining to me what this particular song was all about. And thankfully it was that song, why do you have to be like that? I'm going to marry her anyway. And all that sort. But a 4-year-old is explaining this song to me. A 4-year-old. We're custodians of that innocence. We're responsible for that innocence. When those of you who are Sunday school teachers teach our children, you're not just teaching them stories. You're an example to them. You are showing them love. You're showing them peace. You are long-suffering. You're teaching them patience. It goes beyond just the lesson. It's everything that we do. So protecting our innocence applies to us too. Applies to us as adults. Once you've seen something, you can't take it back. Once you've experienced something, you can't take that experience away. Good or bad. Good or bad. And I hear about a lot of youth who go through some difficult times, and you know what? They're away with their friends on a weekend, suddenly some social products come out, next thing you know, I'll just try it. You can never take that back. That innocence that's broken can never be returned. We're not immune to it. And so the challenge that I have for you is that we, as Christians, have the fruits challenged all the time. If we allow it into our life, then we've lost a bit of those fruits. And it's so hard to recover. So, I thought I'd finish off with this verse. You guys know the Beatitudes. We're not going to go through the blessed list. But I wanted to finish with these last 2 verses from the Beatitudes. And that is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Anytime we're challenged, anytime we're told, you know what, you guys are crazy, it's a blessing for us. Anytime we have an opportunity to present our perspective and it's shot down, it's a blessing for us. It says so right here. Blessed are you when you revile and when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. When St. Anthony said there will come a day, each of us is living in that day now. And remember, all we're standing for is the blessings that God wants to give us. So take every opportunity that we can. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm pretty sure there's no questions, unless people want to have a question or a comment or something to add. Yeah. A quick note. Yeah. Yeah. If you pull up medical texts from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and even as late as the 70s, homosexuality was diagnosed as a disease. And there were often treatment protocols that were put in place to treat homosexuality, which include shock therapy, medication, a whole bunch of stuff. You know what? Let's not go by, 50 years ago of learning or things that we thought were real 50 years ago. Science and technology evolves very quickly, and we learn more than we know as we go. Don't worry about what it was diagnosed as. Worry about the fact of our perspective, which is it's a sin. Park it as a sin and leave it at that. There are all sorts of reasons why people fall into homosexuality. And first and foremost, I would suggest that there is a craving, there is a physical craving, a lustful craving, a homosexual craving, a self-satisfying craving that is acted upon and then followed through. And there's a lot of psychology that goes with that. But ultimately, if you ask yourself the question, people use the argument, let's go with the 30 seconds. Yeah, if you put up with me. 30 seconds. It's genetic. Yeah? Heard that? It's genetic. Okay? If that were true, people understand genetics, right? You mix genes, and what happens? They end up, coming up with different phenotypes and that sort of stuff. So your genotype is your two different types of genes that from your parents. They come together and they create a phenotype, which is your behavioural, which is your outward physical appearance and whatnot. So if you go with the argument that this is genetic, and it has been genetic for X number of years, by sheer virtue of the fact that genetics would push a male and a male and a female together, meant that before IVF technology and everything else, they could not procreate. So what happens when you can't procreate? You can't pass on the gene. So by sheer natural selection, that process is eliminated. So that's why I cannot buy the argument of it's genetic. Add to that, I am a researcher. I get onto what's known as Medline. Yeah, for those of you who are in medicine, who work in research, who are physios and whatnot. Medline, these are international journals that are published. When you do a search for genetics and homosexuality, anybody done this? What's the number one hit that comes up? Number one hit is a bunch, I'm talking thousands of articles on the gene mutations that occur in the virus that is spread through homosexual activity, HIV. Number one. There's nobody touting they've found the gene that codes for homosexuality. No one. I'm talking there are millions of people that are just working on identifying this gene. We've mapped the human genome, for the most part. We can't find that one gene. That's my 30 seconds on it.
Sorry, it's one thing that always intrigues me about the genetic part of it. I'm by no means a scientist, and I cannot profess that I could actually say it's right along with it. But if I was to even assume that it is genetic the same thing about people who have anger management issues. You know, they're genetically born that way. They're being psychologically programmed that way. But we somehow cannot tolerate someone yelling at the bank to you or yelling at the shopping centre and say, this person is bad. But all of a sudden it's okay with homosexuality because...
You know, can I add to that? I did an MBA at Macquarie University, and the lecturer, he was a really fascinating lecturer. He talked about philosophy. He was a philosopher, and we talked about Homer and Socrates and a whole bunch of philosophers. And he's got a psychology background too. And he was called for a radio interview. And the interviewer said, Professor Spillane, what would you call a man who's murdered 2 people? And he wanted him to say that he was insane. And the only thing he could say to him was, well, he's a killer of 2 people. He's a murderer of 2 people. He said, no. But how would you diagnose him? He goes, well, he's just killed 2 people. All I can tell you is he has killed 2 people. This diagnosis is thrown around too quickly. This, you know, mental illness, whatnot, it is a real thing. However, it legitimizes people saying, you know what, that's how I was born. That's it. I don't discount the fact that it is a preference. It is somebody's preferred behaviour, and that's their choice. Our behaviours are our choice. And it's as simple as that. Leave it as a behavioural choice, and that's what it is. And ultimately, we as Christians, we would still love that person. You know, if they were to come into our church and want to get away from that behaviour, we would still love that person and show that person love. Regardless of if they continue with the behaviour, we would still pray for them. The number one thing as Christians, right? You know how we want to overcome the apathy thing and show people love? You know the number one thing you do? To somebody you don't like, you tell yourself, God resides in that person. Simple as that. There's God in that person. How can you dislike God? There's God in that person. Simple as that. That person chooses to behave in a certain way that is out of our control. Any other questions, comments, clarifications, or Sandra?
Just a quick comment,
Slash question.
Some people might say, like, you know, like from the Beatitudes or just from our teachings or whatnot, that God tries to make life for us a little bit different. Why would anyone bother, you know, following like, how do you approach that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so the question, let me rephrase it. If you look at the Beatitudes, for instance, if you look at the rules that are stated in the Bible about how we should live our life, some people would say that's making it really hard for ourselves. And why? What's in it for us? Why would you want to follow these difficult things? Why would you want to punish yourself? Anybody? Builds resilience. Agreed. What else?
I don't think fulfilling the will of God is necessarily a torture if you love God. If you understand it. It's a torture if you look at it purely as this is how you're supposed to act.
Yeah.
You just like to take away the love of God
Yeah.
from that equation.
Take away the higher intent.
Yeah.
It's really it is a difficult way to live, and that's it. Do you know what my argument to that is? And, you know, I've come across these sorts of things before. So for people who say, oh, why would you want to live like that? You know, it's a difficult way to live. Clearly, they're not swayed by faith, right? So you can't argue our emotional connection with God back to someone who hasn't seen a connection with God. So it's simple. You take it at face value, and you say, well, you know what? It might be a little bit difficult. It's not so bad because it's really not that hard to be nice to people. But if I'm right, I get eternity. If you're wrong, just leave it there. You don't need to see what happens. But you take, for someone who doesn't know the value of a blessing from God, the peace that you can experience from going to a monastery or attending a mass, you can never explain that. But for someone who sees it as just actions, okay, well, these actions lead somewhere for me, but the lack of actions for you would have disastrous consequences. It's just taking them at their level of logic. Any other comments, questions? I think we're all done, all silent, and over to, we call him Bishoy.
That was great, wasn't it? Another round of applause for Sherief. Sherief always enlightens. That's the beauty of Sherief. He's clear. He makes sense to us. We can relate. It relates to today's society. Thanks again, Sherief. That was really, really good. We look forward to having you next time. And thanks for whipping it up on short notice as well. Now, just a few announcements. I know we've pulled a bit on time. We've got the retreat coming, first weekend of April is the St.Verena and St.Bishoy's retreat. At least for the time being, if you're keen or interested, approach either myself or Marina or Shadi or George. Just the regular, just approach us, have a chat to us so we can write your name down, or just at least click going on Facebook. We are going to have an online registration going, so we'll whip that up this week. The other thing is, I believe St. Mary's Church are having a camp as well, so we obviously encourage you, if you're interested, to speak to the crew there at St. Mary's. And bookshop. The bookshop's really got a lot of books at the moment. It's the first time in actually over a year that we've had so much books, so do have a look. Okay. It took a while to read it. St. Mary's Fete, 15th and 16th of February, if you guys are keen. And I believe the St. Macarius Fete is on tomorrow in that's the one. That's the one. And do we have snacks? Yeah, so we got snacks on the third building. Sorry, I'm terrible. Snacks on the third building, bookshop in the second building. Enjoy yourselves and stand up for prayer.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Heavenly Lord, Almighty God, we thank you, Heavenly Father, for bringing us together. We ask you, dear Lord, to allow the fruits of the Spirit to grow in us, for us to maximise those fruits, dear God, and to stand fervently against anyone who tries to take those fruits from us. Please, dear God, strengthen us in our path, guide us in our lives, help us to get closer to you, dear Lord. Give us peace in our lives, dear Father. Give us joy, give us long-suffering. Help us become the best people that we can be, dear Father. Always look after us and be with us. In the end, dear Lord, through the prayers of St. Anthony the Great, St.Bishoy, St.Verena, please hear us as we lift up our hearts to your one voice, saying, Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, that we forgive our trespasses against us, and lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Jesus Christ, thy will. When I finish off with the message, I'm like, thank God.
I'm going to make you sweat.
I want to hug still.
Thanks for putting up with me.
What do you mean putting up with you? I usually give